Hi again everyone, Bear from Bear Reads Books. Welcome back to my channel. Time for another book review today, and I'd like to talk first about Margaret Atwood, The Testaments. I was really indifferent to this book, both before I started reading it and when I first started reading it. But let me get one thing straight before I go any further. It is a brilliant, fun, engaging read, and I gave it 4 stars. And all of the bad things I thought, and I may have even said in the past, I don't necessarily take back, but it overcame the flaws that I saw early on, and I think those flaws are maybe still there. For those of you who don't know, The Testaments by Margaret Atwood is part 2, or a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, which she wrote now almost or more than 30 years ago, and which has since been adapted into a movie, which was pretty bad, and a television show which now is up to season 3 or 4 and is excellent. And I read the book, the first book, The Handmaid's Tale, many years ago, and I haven't gone back to reread it before picking up The Testaments. So some things about the first book, I think, for me, are a little bit clouded by how well I know the television show and the adaptation to the book. So that's, I think, part of my confusion. I maybe should have gone back and read that first book before doing the second, because I do remember it very fondly. I remember it being a great book. Especially, and I think the main thing for me is, I feel like the second book is toned down for a younger, more innocent audience. What I remember of the violence and the brutality of the first book, I don't see in the second book. You hear mention of people hanging on the wall, and you hear mention of horrible things happening to people, but there's not a huge amount of actual things horrible happening to people that is described. What I am uncertain of is whether my memory of that in the first book is tarnished because of the television show. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Is the violence and brutality of the television show what I'm remembering about that first book, or is that actually in the first book and then the second book has really been toned down? That I can't remember. But the violence and brutality isn't there in the second book. So that's number one. I thought it's still very well dealt with. The way in which Gilead punishes people and keeps people downtrodden, I think, is beautifully written in the second book. I think it is remarkable how well you picture that as you move through the second book. What I got from the second book is that it ticks almost every single box from the first book. And I'm not sure whether that's in answer to so many readers of the first book's concerns over the last 30 years, or is it purely in response to the positive reaction to the television show. And here I'm really talking about an author's relationship to their art. Up until, well, say let's before the Handmaid's Tale television show came out, was Margaret Atwood happy to leave these questions unanswered? And were the readers of the original Handmaid's Tale 30 years ago and everywhere in between, were they happy to have these questions left unanswered? And if so, great, leave them unanswered. I never personally felt like I needed those questions answered. I think it said an awful lot all by itself, standing as it did 35 years ago. So what then it feels like for me is when the second one comes out, the second book comes out, that it feels directly a response to the television show only. So much so that I listen to it on audiobook, and then they get one of the actors, Aunt Lydia, the actor who plays Aunt Lydia, they get her to read one of the parts for the book. So, and Margaret Atwood is on record as saying that for years she didn't have the voice for the second book. She didn't know where the voice for the second book was coming from, and then she only realised what that voice was going to be once she saw this actor play Aunt Lydia in the TV show. So almost by her own admission, Margaret Atwood is saying that the book is a response to the television show, rather than a response to readers of the first book or unanswered questions of the first book. And I'm not sure whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm still undecided. Either way, it's a great book because it ticks all those boxes. If you felt cheated by the first book, which I didn't particularly, but it's a great story and it really moves at quite a pace. And yes, but it's nice little bows all through the book, with little reveals here and there as they go. And maybe it feels like it's written for a younger audience because now we're talking about June's or Offred's offspring. We're talking about her two children, mostly, are the main characters. So the child that was born before Gilead, that was baby Nicole and removed to Canada. We're talking about that child, and we're talking about the child that she had. That was baby Nicole. So baby Nicole was the one that was born in Gilead to a commander, or was born as a citizen of Gilead, and the other one was the daughter that was 7 or 8 when Offred was first captured, and the daughter, then they were separated. So you have these two girls 7 or 8 years apart who have now grown. I think the youngest one is 16, so that will make the oldest one 23, 24, and living their separate lives and their separate stories within this novel, coming together in Gilead to move forward this destruction of Gilead, which we didn't see in the first book. So it's a great tale, let's say. It's a great tale, but there's lots of little neat bows and there's a lot of ticked boxes. But it's great, it's fantastic, and I give it 4 stars because it is so great. It is so good. It just feels a little bit forced and a little bit like fan fiction, like they've presented it for fans of the TV show rather than for fans of the original novel. But disregarding all that, it's a sensational read, and you should all read it. I give it my heartfelt recommendation that even with those faults, no matter what you think her motivations for writing this, it's a fantastic book. So go and read it. That's all I got. Have a great day, everyone, wherever you may be, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.